Humanity has a special talent. We keep losing fights we started against problems we invented. Every time you look at history, you realize something terrifying. The world was not destroyed by asteroids, or monsters, or gods throwing tantrums. No. Most of the biggest disasters in history happened because someone said the most dangerous sentence ever invented. It will probably be fine. School books call these events tragic. Movies call them inevitable. But once you see the receipts, you realize they were completely preventable, avoidable, predictable, and in most cases, aggressively stupid. So today, we are diving into 22 disasters that humanity built with its own hands, ignored every warning about, and then acted shocked when everything exploded. Let us start with one of the classics. 1. The Titanic Myth. Everyone grows up hearing the same confident lie. The Titanic was unsinkable, like someone stapled a superhero cape to a boat and expected physics to clap. People imagine a majestic steel giant cruising through the night, betrayed by one unlucky iceberg. A tragic twist of fate, nature being dramatic. Here is the real story. The ship got multiple iceberg warnings. Officers ignored them. They sped up anyway. The binoculars were locked in a cabinet because someone lost the key. And the steel plates were made of budget rivets that snapped like boiled noodles. This is not fate. This is what happens when you treat the ocean like a racetrack. If the Titanic had a slogan, it would be overconfidence on sale, half price today. 2. The Great Molasses Flood. Boston, 1919. A 70-foot tank of molasses sat in the middle of the city, known for rumbling, cracking, and leaking like an emotional teenager. Everyone heard the noises. Everyone saw the sticky brown drips. The company shrugged and painted it brown so nobody would notice the leaks. Then winter warmed up for one day. The liquid expanded, and the tank exploded with the force of a small bomb. A 25-foot wave of molasses tore through the streets at highway speed. People blame freak accident. No, this was a giant sugary grenade built by a company that thought engineering was optional. The disaster was not caused by molasses. It was caused by the world's laziest attempt at problem solving. 3. Chernobyl. People talk about Chernobyl like it was some mysterious nuclear curse. Like the reactor just woke up one night and chose violence. The myth says the explosion was unpredictable, impossible to foresee. A tragic accident caused by complex technology. Here is what actually happened. Engineers warned the plant managers for years. Safety tests were ignored. Equipment was outdated. And during the final experiment, they turned off the emergency shutdown system. On purpose, because they wanted the test to go faster. The reactor did not melt down out of nowhere. It melted down because humans treated a nuclear plant like a microwave timer. This was not a mystery. This was a checklist of every bad decision you could possibly make in one night. 4. The Hindenburg. For decades, people assumed lightning doomed the Hindenburg. A great airship defeated by the sky, a tragedy of nature versus humanity. The truth is less poetic and far more embarrassing. The airship was coated in a mix of aluminum powder and iron oxide, which is extremely flammable, like rocket fuel but make it fashionable. And they used hydrogen inside the balloon because it was cheaper than helium. Everyone knew hydrogen burns like gossip in a small town. They flew it anyway. So when the spark hit, the Hindenburg did exactly what physics had been threatening it would do from day one. It went up like a giant flaming birthday balloon. People blamed the weather, but the real cause was cost-cutting disguised as bravery. 5. The Great Fire of London. People talk about the fire like it was destiny. A medieval city engulfed by fate, chaos, and one unlucky bakery. The myth says the fire spread because the wind was strong, because the city was old, because that is just how things were back then. But the truth is painfully simple. London was basically a matchbox pretending to be a city. Houses were tightly packed. Everything was made of wood. Residents stored gunpowder in their basements next to candles. Fire codes did not exist. Officials ignored warnings about overcrowding for years. So when the first spark hit, the city reacted exactly like a giant wooden Jenga tower dipped in oil. The fire was not inevitable. It was urban design done on nightmare mode. 6. The Halifax Explosion. In 1917, 2 ships entered Halifax Harbor. One carried high explosives stacked like a warehouse sale. The other was in the wrong lane. They saw each other. They had time to correct. They still collided. The myth says it was a tragic maritime accident, Unavoidable. Random. But witnesses reported warning horns, flares, and shouted directions. Everyone knew what the explosive ship carried. One small change in direction would have avoided disaster. Instead, the ship's brushed sides, sparks flew, and the harbor transformed into a shockwave zone. The blast was so huge it shattered windows miles away. People blamed bad luck. But really, it was the world's deadliest example of, "I thought you were steering." 7. The Johnstown Flood. Everyone remembers the flood as a natural disaster. A wall of water roaring down the valley without warning. A freak tragedy nobody could have predicted, except the entire thing was man-made. A group of wealthy businessmen bought a dam, turned the reservoir into their private lake resort, lowered the dam wall so their carriages could cross it, removed the safety pipes, ignored engineers who begged them to reinforce the structure. Then it rained. The weakened dam held for a moment, sighed like it had finally given up on humanity, and collapsed. Johnstown never had a chance. This was not nature attacking people. This was rich people modifying infrastructure like it was a toy set. 8. Pompeii. Movies love to show Pompeii as a sudden apocalypse. A calm city living its best life until Vesuvius decided to ruin everyone's weekend. But Pompeii had warnings. Years of tremors, shaking floors, collapsing houses, animals fleeing. People joked about it, patched their walls, and went back to the baths. Even on the day of the eruption, the mountain belched smoke for hours. Locals watched it like it was a free fireworks show. They stayed. They waited. They hoped it would calm down. Then the ash fell. The air thickened. The pyroclastic surge arrived. Pompeii was not lost in a surprise event. It was lost in the world's deadliest case of "let us just wait and see." 9. The Challenger disaster. People describe the Challenger explosion as a tragic accident, a heartbreaking failure of technology, a moment when science slipped. But the truth is colder than the weather that caused it. Engineers warned NASA the O-rings would fail in freezing temperatures. They repeated the warning. They documented it. They begged management not to launch. NASA pushed ahead anyway because schedules mattered more than physics. The shuttle lifted. The seals shrank. The boosters leaked, and the sky split open. This was not a failure of rockets. It was a failure of listening. A disaster built on the sentence, "It will probably be okay." 10. Baiae, Rome's sunken playground. The myth says ancient Rome's luxury resort city sank mysteriously. A glamorous Atlantis swallowed by the sea without warning. Reality is far less romantic. Baiae was built on volcanic vents. The ground literally breathed heat. Baths steamed year-round. Locals joked that the earth hummed. They ignored cracks in the floors and sections of coastline that kept sinking. Scientists today know the entire area sits on a supervolcano dome. The land rises and falls like a giant exhaling. Romans watched the warning signs. They built more spas. They doubled down on pleasure. Eventually the ground dipped. The sea rushed in. Baiae did not drown. It slowly sank while everyone pretended it was fine. 9. The Challenger disaster. People describe the Challenger explosion as a tragic accident, a heartbreaking failure of technology, a moment when science slipped. But the truth is colder than the weather that caused it. Engineers warned NASA the O-rings would fail in freezing temperatures. They repeated the warning. They documented it. They begged management not to launch. NASA pushed ahead anyway because schedules mattered more than physics. The shuttle lifted. The seals shrank. The boosters leaked, and the sky split open. This was not a failure of rockets. It was a failure of listening. A disaster built on the sentence, "It will probably be okay." 10. Baiae, Rome's sunken playground. The myth says ancient Rome's luxury resort city sank mysteriously. A glamorous Atlantis swallowed by the sea without warning. Reality is far less romantic. Baiae was built on volcanic vents. The ground literally breathed heat. Baths steamed year-round. Locals joked that the earth hummed. They ignored cracks in the floors and sections of coastline that kept sinking. Scientists today know the entire area sits on a supervolcano dome. The land rises and falls like a giant exhaling. Romans watched the warning signs. They built more spas. They doubled down on pleasure. Eventually the ground dipped. The sea rushed in. Baiae did not drown. It slowly sank while everyone pretended it was fine. 13. The The second Molasses disaster nobody talks about. People think the Boston Molasses flood was a one-time freak event. A bizarre, sticky tragedy that could never happen twice. Except the warning signs were there long before the explosion. Inspectors saw cracks in the tank. Residents heard groaning metal every night. Children dipped their fingers into the leaks like it was a free candy fountain. The company painted the tank brown to hide the problem instead of fixing it. When the tank finally burst, it was not a surprise. It was the finale of a disaster that everyone had front row seats to. A giant syrup bomb that announced its existence for years while officials said, "Looks fine to me." 14. The Tunguska Panic. The myth says villagers were shocked by a mysterious explosion in the Siberian forest. That they thought the world was ending. That the event was a cosmic surprise from nowhere. But locals had seen warning signs for weeks. Strange lights. Fireballs cutting across the sky. Animals acting terrified. Forests rumbling at night. Hunters telling stories about heat waves overhead. Instead of investigating, most settlers ignored every sign. When the explosion finally flattened miles of trees, people blamed everything but the obvious. Witches, demons, the end times. The sky was practically waving a red flag for weeks. Humanity treated it like background scenery. 15. The Fox River flood that should never have happened. People remember the 1937 Fox River flood as a natural overflow, a seasonal surge. A river doing what rivers do. But the real reason the town drowned was paperwork. For years, engineers begged officials to clear the drainage system. Leaves, trash, mud, entire tree branches clogged every outlet. The river could not breathe. The town council said maintenance was too expensive. They approved festivals but not repairs. Then the rain came, not even a record storm. Just normal rainfall. The blocked drains turned the streets into a basin. The river rose. The town sank. This was not nature versus humans. This was a clogged bathtub scaled up to an entire city. 16. The Mount Pinatubo warnings. Before Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, scientists practically shouted at everyone to evacuate. The mountain trembled. Gas leaks increased. Ash vented from cracks. Monitoring teams issued alerts again and again. But for months, local authorities hesitated. Some thought the experts were exaggerating. Some feared economic losses. Some insisted the volcano had been quiet for centuries, so it would likely stay calm. When it finally erupted, the blast was massive. Towns were buried. Air bases collapsed. Ash covered entire regions. The tragedy was not the eruption. It was the months spent asking the wrong question. Not, is it dangerous? But are we sure enough to act? 17. The $2 tree branch that caused the Northeast blackout. People love telling the story of the 2003 blackout like it was some mysterious grid failure. A massive electrical collapse that came out of nowhere. A technological monster waking up. But the real cause was a tree branch. One branch. Dangling too close to a transmission line. Utility workers were supposed to trim it months earlier. They skipped it. They skipped the follow-up. They skipped the alarm that warned them it needed trimming. The branch hit the line. The line overheated. The system rerouted power. More lines overheated. Then the entire grid face planted. Millions lost power because someone did not feel like using a ladder. A $2 problem created a billion-dollar disaster. 18. The Wells Fargo meltdown. People describe the Wells Fargo fake account scandal like some sneaky rogue employees caused trouble. A few bad apples, a misunderstanding, a surprise. But the warning signs were loud and public. Employees complained they were being pressured to hit impossible sales quotas. Supervisors ignored them. Thousands of workers filed reports about unethical practices. Executives pretended they saw nothing. Then customers started finding bank accounts they never opened. Credit cards they never requested. Fees they never agreed to. Millions of fraudulent accounts existed before anyone took it seriously. This was not a banking mystery. It was a disaster created by leadership rewarding chaos and punishing honesty. A slow-motion crash that everyone saw coming except the people paid to prevent it. 19. The Deepwater Horizon spill. People framed the disaster as a tragic malfunction in the deep ocean. A freak failure, a sudden blowout nobody could have predicted. But reality is a checklist of ignored warnings. Engineers flagged pressure irregularities. Safety valves tested poorly. Cement sealing the well had known weaknesses. Workers raised concerns hours before the explosion. Management pushed ahead to save time and money. Deadlines mattered more than data. When the well failed, it failed exactly the way experts said it would. Millions of barrels of oil poured into the Gulf. A catastrophe disguised as an accident. Nothing about it was unpredictable. It was a disaster carved out of pure corporate confidence. 23 Mile Island. The myth paints 3 Mile Island as a random nuclear mishap, a sudden equipment glitch, a plant caught off guard. But the alarms were ringing long before the partial meltdown. Warning lights flashed. Operators misunderstood them. Procedures were unclear. Training was inconsistent. Technicians overrode safety systems because they believed the indicators were wrong. Every small error stacked on top of another. The meltdown was not a single event. It was a tower of human mistakes built carefully over years. When the reactor overheated, the plant responded like someone trying to fix a car engine by unplugging random wires. Not a nuclear mystery, just preventable chaos wrapped in radiation. 21. The 2008 financial crash. Most people remember it as an unstoppable economic earthquake. A sudden collapse, a global domino effect nobody saw coming. Except everyone saw it coming. Economists warned about the housing bubble for years. Banks kept handing out loans like free samples at a supermarket. Rating agencies stamped toxic assets as safe. Executives ignored internal reports. Regulators looked the other way. Politicians cheered the growth like it was a victory parade. The crash was not a surprise. It was the bill arriving after years of pretending the math would magically solve itself. A catastrophe built brick by brick from denial, greed, and optimism with no evidence. 22. The fall of Easter Island. People tell the story like a tragic mystery. A thriving society vanishing for unknown reasons. A collapsed civilization swallowed by time. But the real cause sits in plain sight. The island was covered in palm trees. Rich soil, thriving wildlife. Then communities cut down trees faster than they could grow. They cleared land for farming. Built giant statues. Used timber for canoes. Ignored every warning that the forest was shrinking. When the last tree fell, the ecosystem collapsed. So did their food supply. So did their society. Easter Island did not fall to the ocean or invaders. It fell to a century-long habit of acting like resources were infinite. A slow-motion disaster that shouted its warnings the entire time. History makes it look like humanity is cursed. But after looking at all these disasters, the truth is simpler. We do not need curses, we have decision makers. Every one of these catastrophes was preventable, fixable, avoidable, and ignored until it exploded. So here is the question. Which disaster shocked you the most? Which one made you look at humanity and whisper, we should not be allowed to supervise ourselves? Drop it in the comments. Like the video if your brain feels slightly betrayed. Subscribe if you enjoy watching the world's mistakes burn in slow motion. And remember, humanity is undefeated at losing to problems humanity created.